Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Auburn Undercover Roundtable. I'm your host, Brandon Marcello, joined by Keith Niebuhr, publisher Ronnie Sanders, and columnist Phillip Marshall. Guys, it's been about a month since we've done one of these, maybe more than that, and it's been quite dramatic, as we all know, and the drama will continue. But here we are recording this on a late Tuesday night, November 13th. And this is where we stand. 3 people say Gus Malzahn is going to be the head coach next year. Gus Malzahn himself, Alan Green, the athletics director, and now the university president, Steven Leath, giving his letting his voice be heard Tuesday before a staff senate meeting on campus. But there is still a somewhat disgruntled fan base, I would say. Obviously, questions about what's going to even happen with this staff, even with Gus coming back. And, of course, just what the heck has happened with this season. Phillip, your reaction to the news over this last week with these 3 men saying, hey, Gus Malzahn is going to be here in 2019, and yet there's still a lot of rumbles and grumbles in the background from Auburn fans, boosters, and power brokers.
Well, there's no question. And, I have to believe that with those 3 people saying it, that Gus is going to be back. And there are powerful people who thought and think otherwise, or what that it should be otherwise. And Steven Leath put himself in an unbelievably bad position last December when he agreed to this contract, because he's going to be wrong whatever he does. And but unlike times past, I don't think there's really a whole lot anybody can do about it, except complain.
Ronnie, what's your take on this whole situation? You're obviously very familiar with Auburn, but from the outside looking in, you hear a lot of these other writers and other fan bases going, how the heck are they going to fire a coach with a $32 million buyout? They just gave that guy a new contract. But, I mean, let's be real here. When they lost to Tennessee, and Phillip can, I'm sure will agree with this too, there was serious grumbling in the background among the type of people who influence decision makers and make decisions. And there was a realistic shot there that Gus Malzahn could be fired. But here we are now saying that's not going to happen. But, Ronnie, we've seen strange situations and dramatic situations at Auburn before, but what's your take on this whole entire situation from where you sit?
I think now it is different because there are no Bobby Louders anymore. Before, you would have somebody there that would force the issue. And so, first of all, Gus Malzahn would have gotten a big contract. He'd gotten paid a bunch of money. He would not have gotten that size buyout had Louder still been in place. So, so it wouldn't have made it impossible to fire him. And now you would have somebody pushing the envelope a little bit. So I just don't see anybody. Phillip would know more than I would, but I don't see anybody in place that can that can do that.
At that time, Louder had enough influence on enough board members that he could make it happen. There are certainly influential board members now, but not that influential that can make it happen. And though some of those influential people, I believe, wanted something to happen, they don't have enough support to make it happen. So unless they do, then it can't happen unless Steven Leath or Alan Green, Steven Leath in reality, decides it's going to happen. And they've made it pretty clear that they don't plan on it happening.
And as you mentioned, this all – yeah, well, and as you mentioned, this all goes back to December and this landing on Steven Leath's lap where he had a lame duck AD at the time, Jay Jacobs, who wasn't involved at all with the contract talks really. And it was Steven Leath and, based off what I've heard, Raymond Harbert involved in the situation. And really no one of athletics influence, I would say, that's in the department working day to day that was heavily involved in these talks. And that is a very strange situation to be in as a school president, especially one that had been on the job for about a year. Phillip, have you ever seen anything like that? Secondly, we talked about this. The buyout is just outrageous. But is this something that a year down the road, maybe it's not happening now, but a year down the road, let's say Gus Malzahn has another 7-win season or something like that, that this not only haunts Gus Malzahn, but it haunts Steven Leath and ends up ending his tenure potentially? Oh,
I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question that this puts him in a very precarious position. Because it was just not necessary. And like you said, that's what how much they paid Gus was not ever going to be an issue. Nobody on the board cared how much you paid him per year.
Right. They could have paid him $8 million a year. That's not the issue. These buyouts and the guaranteed money.
And now here you are. And look, I understand that Leath wasn't completely familiar with football life around here or in the SEC, and I'm guessing here he got caught up in the whole euphoria of beating Georgia and beating Alabama and going to the championship game and all those things, and I'm not sure he realized just how hard that is to do it once doesn't mean you're going to do it again, and to just look at that small sample size and say, hey, this is the guy we want forever, whoever it was. And was just a really bad mistake. And it was a bad mistake whether it was Raymond Harbert or whoever it was, that somebody on the board didn't say, whoa, wait a minute. We can't do this. Well, pay him what you want to, but we're not going to approve this buyout.
My big question is just how involved the board really was.
I think the Harbert was involved. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah. I've heard Harbert. I haven't heard other people's names.
The compensation committee had to approve it.
Right.
And so they probably listened to Harbert. I would imagine whoever was even on the compensation committee, and the compensation committee isn't listed on the website. I looked last night.
Yeah.
But you know, to me, anybody who was involved in it and signed off on it they got to be somewhat accountable too.
Certainly.
Because it didn't make any sense. It was obvious then it didn't make any sense. And now the very worst, well, I don't guess it's the very worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would be if they were 2-8, I guess. But
goodness,
a really
Phillip,
bad scenario has come to pass.
Well, goodness, Phillip, what if they lose to Liberty somehow? I'm not saying it's happening, but what if they lose to Liberty?
I asked somebody that question a little short while ago, and I was told this person is not involved, but is close to it. That's the best way I can put it. And he said, I don't think it matters if he loses to Liberty. If he gets beat by 75 points by Alabama, I don't think it matters.
So there you go, everybody.
This is one guy's opinion.
Right.
This is one guy's opinion who doesn't like it. but that was his opinion.
This might be a little unrelated, but I talked to Steven Leath just briefly before he addressed the faculty Tuesday, and then he gave his State of Auburn address. And what I found fascinating about him, and he got some blowback from some faculty, at least questions from them. And by the way, Phillip, you gave me a heads up that these things are weird. They are weird. One guy got up to complain about the minutes from the previous meeting and how the transcription was incorrect during a verbal fisticuffs that two people had, saying that it wasn't properly conveyed how heated the exchange was. I thought it was hilarious. It was great. So anyway, Steven Leath gets up there to give his State of Auburn address, and he's talking a lot about spending a lot of money and how it might sound like we're spending a lot of money, but we got to do it so it'll pay off in the long run. And I'm just sitting there thinking, yeah, you did that with football. You certainly did that. But he's taking this approach of being very aggressive he's wanting to hire and is in the process of hiring, I believe, 500 tenured faculty within the next calendar year. They already have 100 coming in by the end of this semester to get in place for this summer and next fall. He's very aggressive with that stuff and the money. And then he did this with Gus Malzahn, and then Alan Green's hired and brought in and go, hey, this is the bed we made for you. You have to sleep in it. And what I've learned from all of this is that whatever Steven Leath is saying, Alan Green is going to echo. That if it's coming from Alan Green, Steven Leath, that is the path that Alan Green has to follow. And I saw Alan Green at the State of Auburn faculty address today as well, and he quickly waved. But as Steven Leath said in his quote to me, he said, Alan put it perfectly last week. I agree with everything he said. He's our coach for next year. What I also found interesting was Steven Leath saying, I understand that fans are hugely important. Well, I would think so. After you being here for 18 months, if you don't understand now how avid Auburn fans are, you certainly know now, because they have let him know that he made a mistake giving Gus Malzahn $32 million guaranteed at the very least in this contract. And I'm telling you, the moment I mentioned Gus Malzahn's name, guys, Steven Leath's face dropped when I was talking to him. He did not want to talk about it today. So anyway, that's what I got today from talking to Steven Leath and being in that faculty meeting. It was Steven Leath is a very aggressive guy, it seems like, as far as the university. He's talking about growth, spending a lot of money, and certainly looks like he is willing to do that with athletics when it came to Gus Malzahn. That's the position they're in now.
You know, I've been very impressed with how Alan Green has handled himself since he's been here. He is an impressive man, and I feel really badly for him in this particular situation, because he didn't have anything to do with it. He can't fix it. I mean, no AD can say, "Okay, I'm gonna unilaterally say we're going to spend $32 million to fire the coach." I don't think any. So he is left in a bad position, and I think that he's doing the best he can to understand what's going on and try to work with Gus and try to help mitigate some things. Now, whether he's having any luck or not, who knows? But I think he's trying.
Ronnie, when you look across this coaching landscape, I'm just going to play a hypothetical game here. It's not happening. At least it doesn't appear so, unless there's some massive tidal wave that pushes Steven Leath out of office somehow, some way. But if Auburn had made or was going to make a coaching change, who would even be on their radar right now? Because I have a hard time coming up with names.
You know, that's a great question. There just aren't a lot of proven guys out there. I mean, if you're looking for head coaches, Josh Heupel at Central Florida has done a great job, but he's only been a head coach 1 year. Charlie Strong at South Florida, he failed at Texas, but he's done a great job at Louisville, done a really good job at South Florida. There aren't a lot of guys if you're looking for head coaches. If you're looking for assistant coaches, that's a little bit different. But if you're going to hire a head coach, there aren't many guys out there that are proven that you can go get.
You're missing one guy now. Guy that's been in the NFL, has been at Auburn. He's available. He'll probably come cheap. Bobby Petrino.
There you go. I would like to see. I'd like to see Malzahn hire Petrino as the offensive coordinator.
Oh my God! Gus would have to wear. Gus would have to wear earplugs every day.
Yeah, they have such similar personalities, and their vocabulary is clearly the same. So.
Well, let me ask you guys this though: would you consider him? Look, I know it's tough to be a head coach and then drop down, but what about as a quarterback coach? Is that something any school out there would consider Petrino for? I mean, the track record at the quarterback position prior to this year has been pretty remarkable.
Oh, I think Petrino can get a job. I'm not sure he can ever get one in the NFL. We'll see, but after walking out on the Falcons, I'm not sure that that's going to fly. But I don't think there's any question. He can coach if he wants to coach. Can he be a head coach? That's in question. Could he get a smaller job? Probably. He's had one bad year at Louisville. Otherwise, he's done a really good job everywhere he's been, except you take care of he's got plenty of off the field stuff. But as far as coaching the football team in college, he's done a really good job. So I think he can get a coordinator job somewhere. Would we be willing to work for somebody after all this time? I don't know that, but last time I talked to him, he still was coach.
Yeah, Bobby certainly though seems to have scared off a lot of people that would work with him, because his staff now was filled with 2 son-in-laws,
his own son,
children, and before that, of course, his brother Paul Petrino was his OC at one point. And I remember just at Arkansas, he was having to hire guys that he ran into while coaching in Montana when he was younger and everything. There's not a lot of folks out there that like working for him.
No, and then there's the always in demand Brian Van Gorder.
Well, I think part of it is, there's a little bit of a backstory with him hiring his family. I mean, they know how he is.
Yeah.
I remember I helped Ron Zook hire his brother Paul Petrino at Illinois when Paul was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas, and there's a long story about how Bobby handled it when Paul told him. Probably shouldn't repeat it, but it was not pretty. And then the defensive line coach there at Louisville that was just let go when Bobby was let go, that's his son-in-law. He's got.
Didn't he play for him too? Didn't he play for him?
He did. He played for him, and I believe that one of the daughters and the defensive line coach there, I think they have three or four kids. Yeah, they got kids. Yeah. And then Katie, the younger one, just had a baby. He's got his family around. So that's part of the reason he hired those guys. He felt like they could do a good job, and felt like they understood what he wanted. And hey, they've been around him. They know how he is. So. I think there's more at play than just not being able to find somebody to work for him. I think it's, there was a family situation there, and he wanted his kids and grandkids around, which is certainly understandable.
He certainly loved his grandkids. I remember at Arkansas, I guess when they had that first grandkid, he was always wanting the kid around. All right, guys. So Gus Malzahn's back in 2019. He said Tuesday they're going to be better offensively. I want to talk about what this staff's going to look like next season, because from everything I'm hearing, there could be massive changes on the offensive side with the staff. And I believe if I was a betting man, and I'm not a betting man because if I was, I wouldn't have any money, but I don't believe Chip Lindsey's going to be the offensive coordinator next season as it stands today. Having said that, who do you guys think will be the OC when the season opens next year against Oregon?
I didn't believe it would be Hugh Freeze, but I have changed.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
That's not based on any hard and fast information, but that's whose name I'm hearing. I had heard some talks previously about Bobby Bentley, who is at South Carolina. He's not the coordinator, but the last few days, Hugh Freeze is all I've heard, and I think that would be the best chance, I think, to calm the waters at least a little bit, because I'm sure Gus will sign an oath in blood that he's not going to bother him and that he's going to run the offense, and he probably will until the first 3 and out. And but that's if I had to bet, that's who I would bet on. And I wonder if that's the case, if he might then also have some input into the rest of the staff too. Now that would be very un-Gus-like, but this is an unusual situation.
What about all right? If JB Grimes were to be let go, I hate talking about hypotheticals with people's jobs, but I heard this name today. Now it's slipping me. The offensive line coach at Miami, who of course is an Auburn guy,
Stacey Searles.
Searles. I know he was up here before Herb Hand was hired, talking to the staff, and that didn't quite work out. But I wonder, as you said, if Gus Malzahn was to hire a Hugh Freeze, Does he let Hugh build his own staff, or does Gus kind of, well, this is the hot name, I'll go with the hot name? Because that's what he's done sometimes with some of these position coaches, and especially at defensive coordinator. He's gotten proven coordinators in the past, and maybe he'll try to do the same with the offensive side now that he's maybe learned his lesson, but I don't know if he has.
Maybe. Well,
I think that.
Go ahead, Ron.
No, I think that. Do I think that the new coordinator would hire everybody on staff? No. Would I think that he would have some input? Yeah. I mean, usually you don't take a job unless you can bring at least one guy with you. A name to keep an eye on would be Chris Phillip at North Carolina. He was in the job last time. He's got a title, Larry Porter. They worked together. So he'd be a name to keep an eye on as well on offensive line.
And the other thing I would say, with Hugh Freeze would just be how much control does he have? Just because, I'm sure he's just begging to get back into college football. I know he's with that new pro football league that has yet to start, starting in February. But if he gets a job in the SEC working for his friend Gus Malzahn, one would argue, hey, he would be willing to just sit there and call Gus's plays and do whatever Gus wants just because he's back in college football.
I think you could say that, or you could say that Gus might trust him more, and that this will be the first time Gus has had someone who is something of an equal as offensive coordinator. He had Rhett for most of the time, and then he had Chip, who he hired as an analyst out of high school. So Hugh Freeze, on the other hand, has been a head coach in this league, and he and Gus are really friends. If I'm Hugh Freeze, if I'm coming to Auburn to be the offensive coordinator, I'm hoping at some point to get another chance to be a head coach. And I'm not sure you're going to get that opportunity by just sitting there calling Gus's plays.
Keith, what do you think about some of these names that we're mentioning?
Yeah, I've been talking to recruits and their parents, and just they hear a lot of the chatter as well. And obviously, Kendall Briles, Art Briles' son, is one of the names that consistently comes up with those people. The question is, he's very tight with the head coach at Houston, right? Ronnie Major Applewhite, and Kendall may be positioning himself for a head coaching job. And, quite frankly, seeing what's happened to the last two offensive coordinators at Auburn, that might scare away a young guy who's moving up, whereas Hugh Freeze has a lot less, it would seem, to lose. The thing with Freeze is, a couple areas that he can recruit, and it comes back to recruiting for me. Look at the receivers that he brought into Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of studs. That probably helped keep George Pickens. That probably helped recruit receivers down the line. Hugh's got some kind of recruiting acumen. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, obviously they got into and had some problems at Ole Miss, but by and large, his personality is something that seems to register and click well with recruits. And I think Kendall would be very good too, but he may not be as familiar with the SEC landscape, obviously, as Hugh Freeze. Now, on the offensive line, Stacy Searles at Miami, he's got his own issues, and I'm not here to say whether he's a great coach or not a great coach, but Miami's offensive line has struggled so much this year, really rivaling Florida State. I think Ronnie would agree is probably one of maybe the two worst offensive lines in the major elite programs that we consider in the Power Five. So I've heard that you've probably heard the same thing, that there's probably going to be some mandatory changes at Miami, and Stacy potentially could be in trouble down there. Now, his daughter, it should be pointed out, works in the recruiting office at Auburn. Taylor's her name. She does a great job, one of the more well-respected young people in the Auburn recruiting office. And Stacy's well-respected too, but Miami's just really struggling on the offensive line. And then finally, Coach Cap at North Carolina, who Ronnie mentioned, through the years, they've actually recruited against Auburn a decent bit, and recruits love him. And I know Ronnie can attest to that. They absolutely love the guy. They're high on Searles too, but they love Coach Cap. And for a guy in North Carolina that people at Auburn may not be familiar with, I can tell you unequivocally that recruits, by and large, really like that. That would probably be somebody, and I don't want to write off JB, who, obviously I deal with and like a lot. But if they were going to make a change, those are a couple of guys certainly to watch. But Cyril's situation is maybe a little tenuous right now, to be honest with you. Ron, what do you hear?
Yeah, I hear the same thing. And as far as Cap goes, speak of the devil, that's him calling right now. Yeah, he really good recruiter. Will Muschamp considered him at South Carolina. He was in the final two before Muschamp made that hire. So really well respected, really good coach, really good recruiter. I think Cyril's being an Auburn guy would he's going to have some support from boosters and that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do think that I'm not sure you're going to see an extended surge offensively. I think that you'll. My guess is Gus Malzahn's got some guys in mind, and he'll move fairly quickly. I don't get the impression he's the kind of guy that likes to be hit up constantly with hey, hire my guy. I think he's probably got an idea where he's going offensively.
I would think this would be a question for Keith, really. With early signing period, don't you need to get to wherever you're going to be as quick as you can?
Well, yeah. Unless you're going to keep guys through the process and make the change afterwards. You know what I mean? You either need to make it as soon as possible or as late as possible, if that makes any sense. What you don't want to do is to do it, 3 days before the early signing period.
Yeah. It makes sense. I just think it's wrong, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, really, again, if
you keep guys through recruiting that aren't going to be there, that just seems kind of dishonest to me. Always has.
Well, I mean, I think we saw it at Auburn with Damian Craig a few years ago, right?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time. Yep. But I just think it's wrong. Not that anybody cares, but
no, I don't think they do care. I think that's pretty clear.
But it's going to be. I think, and here's the thing. Here's to me where Gus is. What you need to do is hire whoever's the best person you can hire, whether the fans have ever heard of him or not. But he also needs to calm the water some too. Now, the guy now at North Carolina camp, that sounds like the kind of guy that would be good for Auburn. And look, we're talking about offensive line coach like there's a job open. There may well not be an offensive line job open. But Hugh Freeze or whoever, you better hire who's going to help you win and not try to win a press conference.
I agree with that because goodness, Gus doesn't win next year, wouldn't he be fired? Or maybe he wouldn't.
I don't know.
I don't think. I think probably so. Yeah. I mean, I just there's so much noise this year. For him to, especially with a losing record. I mean, it's really hard to make it at Auburn if you have a losing record.
Phillip, go ahead, Keith.
Say one thing, Brandon. Here's the problem, and again, I'm not here to judge whether guys can coach or not coach, but just the last few years, Auburn had that negative cloud over it while they were trying to recruit, right? So it was every school that they were recruiting against was beating it into the heads of these recruits that this guy's not going to survive. And that really hurt the last two recruiting classes. Now, they finished up highly ranked, and they got a lot of great, serviceable, great players, let's be honest. But it did have an impact. And so the last once Gus signed that contract leading up to the Tennessee game this year, there wasn't that negative cloud. There wasn't that uncertainty. And you saw that Auburn was putting together a really strong class, a class that was maybe going to be, still potentially could be, but maybe the most talented of the classes. So now the negative cloud is back. And really, what we don't know is is it going to be there long term, or obviously the wins will dictate that next year, or is this merely for lack of a better term, a stay of execution? And so again, the cloud of uncertainty hangs over these guys as they're trying to recruit. Now, you could argue they've done it to themselves, they brought it on themselves. I get that, but it doesn't negate the fact that there is an impact here on the recruiting trail. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a dog chasing its own tail in a sense, if that makes any sense.
One thing that would concern me is that you look at the 2015-2016 recruiting class, specifically the 2016 class, 12 of the 23 players who signed with Auburn in 2016 are not even on the team anymore. And we talk about depth along the offensive line, but I would say that this idea of star grabbing and going to get some guys, and then they don't work out and they leave for whatever reason or get kicked off their team, they need to take a real long, hard look at that too, because you keep losing 7, 10, 12 recruits every recruiting class, you're not going to be in the win column very much. And I think that, as much as the offensive line struggling and all that, has as much to do with why they're struggling this season. I mean, they've got two guys who should have been the 2-star receivers on this team that are no longer on the team, and Nate Craig Myers and Kyle Davis, for whatever reasons, for leaving or getting kicked off the team. That's another issue they need to look at, in my opinion.
Well,
I agree.
That 2016 class, and you mentioned Nate Craig Myers, Kyle Davis, Antoine Jackson just didn't like where he sat on the depth chart. Woody Barrett didn't really develop. John Broussard didn't really develop. Landon Rice, though, might be the biggest one missing from that 2016 class because of Auburn's, really not much at tight end. Although John Samuel Schenker, proved the other night that he can do some things, but that's one guy. But you're right. You've got to hit more. You absolutely have to hit more. There's no question about that, especially at the quarterback position. Brandon, you posted on our site on Tuesday the quarterback signees from 2015 and 2016, Tyler Queen and Woody Barrett, no longer in the program. And so quarterback development is one thing that people on our message boards and people in the blogosphere and the Auburn fan base, that's the one. If you were going to look, Auburn recruits at a very high level, but if you had two concerns, it'd probably be O-line recruiting, which there's been some hits and there's been some misses. I mean, it's not an all-out failure. Some guys just take more time to develop. But the QB recruiting and the QB development, now are they picking the wrong guys? Are they picking the right guys and not developing them? Whatever the case may be, ultimately that goes back to the head coach who signs off on these. So that's something they've got to get turned around, and obviously they know that.
Phillip,
Keith, walk me.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Brandon. Keith, walk me through. I just know in the past where I worked, the way that it worked is you've got an area, and the area coach brings the tape in or the film in and says, "Hey," shows it to the position coach. Position coach has to sign off on it. Once the area coach does, then the coordinator has to sign off, and then finally once that happens, then the head coach has to sign off. To actually take the kid. Is that what goes on at Auburn? And is it different on both sides, on either side of the ball?
Well, I think that is what goes on at Auburn. And then also, who does he lean on? Who does Gus lean on? I think when it comes to defense, he's going to lean on. He's going to listen more to a Rodney Garner than he would a lot of guys. Kevin Steele is a guy that's been around the block, going back to the heyday at Nebraska. So that's a guy he's going to lean on more. He'll take their input, but ultimately, it's his call. Not even staff meeting. It's not always going to be cut and dry whether you offer a guy or whether you take a guy. But ultimately, that is the process, and it comes down to whether Gus wants a guy. Gus wants to offer a guy, and then it's got to be the right fit. And those official visits. It's not just about the kid winning the kid over. The kid, a lot of the time, has to win the Auburn staff and Gus over. We've seen instances in the past where someone made an official visit and did not really mesh with the current players or with the head coach, and they didn't end up at Auburn. So, yeah, but Ronnie, that's essentially how it goes. But again, just like in any organization, a leader leans on some of his underlings more than others.
Well, I guess my question is, I just know at Alabama, for example, Nick watches every kid and goes through a grade sheet on his own. So, I guess I'm trying to figure out how thorough are they before they actually go on a kid. But I mean, you answered the question, but I guess there's no way to know internally what goes on there. Because I keep hearing that Malzahn picks all the players on offense and all this stuff. I'm just wondering how much the other coaches are involved, or if it's just that basically they bring in the tape and he says yes or no.
Well, I think a lot of the guys are heavily involved, but I will say this: there have been times where I will just say that assistants that are no longer with the program mentioned later on. They said they would have liked if he would have made the call a little quicker on whether to offer a guy. And look, there's two ways to look at that. One, you could say, well, the longer you wait, the further behind you can fall at the kid. Or you can say, hey, credit to him, credit to Gus for doing his due diligence, for taking his time. So there's two schools of thought there.
Well, sometimes you have to offer early to get it to have a chance. But
so Keith, speaking of recruiting, tell us a little bit about where the Kelly Bryant sweepstakes stands right now.
Yeah, this is fascinating, and I'm going to be talking to him in the very near future. That's the former Clemson quarterback, started all of 2017. Obviously, Auburn fans remember him. Might have had one of his 2 or 3 best games of his college career against Auburn. He's given Auburn a hard look. He visited 2 weeks ago. Arkansas is a team that he's giving a long look to. The head coach there, Chad Morris, obviously was the offensive coordinator at Clemson when Kelly got to Clemson. So that past relationship really giving Arkansas a boost here. Miami is involved. Miami's kind of gone a little bit away from a true pro-style quarterback in the last couple of seasons. And one of the reasons they're having to do that is because their offensive line, quite frankly, isn't getting it done. But he's going to officially visit Miami. This weekend he's going to officially visit Mississippi State. North Carolina is also in the mix. But I feel like Auburn thinks it's got a shot. And a source close to Kelly tells me that Auburn absolutely has a shot. He's going to visit again. It will not be an official visit, but the reason for that is more logistical than anything. Driving to Miami from his neck of the woods in the upstate South Carolina region isn't as easy as driving to Auburn. So he's going to be at Auburn either next week or the week after with his parents. That'll be a second trip to Auburn this fall. He's going to have a decision the first week of December. Auburn is telling him, look, they want a veteran quarterback in there. And when you say, you look at Auburn, who they got coming back next year, all these young players, almost the entire offensive line will be back, or maybe the whole offensive line will be back. Obviously, that group's got to play better. All the receivers, the running backs, provided nobody transfers or whatnot, and there's always going to be some attrition. But the bulk of the offense is coming back. So what's the missing piece? Is Malik Willis going to be ready to be a starting quarterback? Can freshman Bo Nix come in this spring and push for the starting job? Who knows? But Kelly Bryant is a known commodity. And whereas those other guys are not. So that's really Auburn's big selling point. And he grew up kind of a guy that really was fascinated by Auburn. It was an offer he always wanted. So now that Auburn has offered, they really have his ear. And we'll see. I think it's sort of open. There's a few schools that feel good. I think Ronnie's heard that North Carolina feels pretty good. I've heard that Arkansas feels pretty good. But Auburn, with transfer, you never count them out. Don't forget this as well. The Auburn staff has always had a pretty good relationship with the Clemson staff. It'd be really a seamless transition for him in a sense. He's not from too far away. Auburn and Clemson campuses, as everybody knows, are similar dynamic. The challenge of playing in the SEC, those are things that he's interested in. So, we'll see. But that last visit's going to be crucial. What do they sell him and his parents on? And he's not going anywhere. He's not pretty sure he's going to be the starter. He's got 1 year to play. And it's really all or nothing. But he's a quality young guy. A lot of people never thought, guys, that he would even play quarterback at Clemson. They thought maybe he'd move to tight end. But he worked hard, honed his skills, and really passed some guys that were more highly rated than him, quite frankly, Derek Cooper being one, to become the starter at Clemson and, got them to the college football playoff last year. He's not super dynamic, but he's a dual-threat guy. And, maybe whereas Auburn didn't have that dual threat element the last 2 years, maybe he gives you a little bit more of that. It's also a kind of a 1 year, what's the word I'm looking for? Not stopgap. That's not fair, but a 1 year, to get the other guys ready, Bo Nix in particular. And, I don't want to sell Malik Willis short, but, I don't hear much chatter, to be honest with you, Brandon. That's more your realm. But it could maybe get Auburn through a year where they've got some other pieces in place.
Yeah, and as you said, Auburn with transfer quarterbacks, their first year are always very successful. Don't know about the second year. Even with Nick Marshall, he improved as a passer, but they didn't win games. And then, of course, we're seeing what's happening right now with Jarrett Stidham, which I think is baffling everybody, including NFL scouts. And that's another interesting thing. Jarrett Stidham's not going to be back next season. I don't see how or why he would be. I asked him Tuesday if he'd be back, and he said, Lord willing, hopefully he'll be living and breathing next season. But he didn't say he's coming back to Auburn. He's not coming back. But they got to have I think they do need a veteran guy because, as you said, the options are Malik Willis, Bo Nix, maybe Joey Gatewood. But at this point, I think the coaches have shown this season, just based off of how they've played Malik Willis, they don't have a lot of confidence in him right now. And I would think, honestly, when Bo Nix comes in the spring, he'll have the head start in a lot of ways, even though he hasn't even been on campus, and he'll be a true freshman. But if they get Kelly Bryant, that would be huge because that is going to be a huge, huge question mark no matter who is a starter if it's not Kelly Bryant next season.
Well, Brandon, it's interesting because what if you land Kelly Bryant? Who leaves? And do they leave before spring, which is quite frankly?
Oh, absolutely. I think that will happen. Yeah.
So who leaves? How many leaves? Bo Nix is going to be there, but potentially you might only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks next year. So that's the yang to the yin. There's always a result of some move you make. So it gets a little dicey when you only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks too.
And that's kind of what happened when John Franklin III and everybody came in. Auburn had 2 quarterbacks leave at some point, and then it was one of them with John Franklin III actually, because it was clear to him he wasn't going to get to play. And Kelly Bryant comes in, and it's going to be pretty clear to Malik Willis and probably Joey Gatewood that they're not going to play because they're going to try and bring Bo Nix up as well. So, and then you got Cord Sandberg there that I think they trust more to be a backup quarterback at this point than the other 2.
Well, yeah, I meant 3 scholarship. I totally lost track of Cord because he didn't play much. But yeah, I mean, still, the options are going to change. Obviously, there's no doubt.
Yeah. Plus, Cord is only 48 years old, so he's still got a few years left.
I think the quarterback thing that's a nationwide thing. That's what I don't think there's any question Auburn will not have the same number of quarterbacks in the fall they start out with in the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. Phillip, I wanted to ask you this. Do you think Gus learned anything this season? As far as is he going to learn from his mistakes this year? Because we've been hearing the same stuff over and over and over and over again every week, and nothing's changed. And it's almost gotten to the point where, it's not the media saying, "Hey, you need to do this," and then he starts doing it. But it's almost like he's 3 or 4 weeks behind on when to change things. Maybe I'm being too critical.
I don't know, man.
It's just strange.
I think he really needs to learn from it. I think that, and I don't like to even get into talking about strategy because there's no reason for anybody to listen to me about football strategy because I don't know what I'm talking about. But just in terms of how he goes about things, how he relates to his coaches, all those kinds of things, and listening to other people. Will that change if he hires Hugh Freeze? Maybe somewhat, but it is, it hasn't changed before. So the ironic thing to me is if you look at the times, and it's really kind of strange when you look back. He came to do what he did on offense, and then he turned it over to Rhett, and then he took it back, and then he turned it back over to Rhett. And then after the LSU game last season, he pretty much got out of Chip's way, and that's according to Chip. He got out of the way. They went to the SEC championship game, and then he got back involved. He turned it over to Rhett. They won 6 straight games. Then he got back involved. And I'm not saying he can't do it himself, but he just needs to either do it himself or let his guy do it. One of the two. This mixture of philosophies and all that stuff it just doesn't work.
To be quite honest, history has a way of repeating itself, but I would think Gus would have learned from the very first year as a coordinator in college football that what he's doing right now will never work, because when he was at Arkansas, they tried to mix 2 philosophies. It never worked. He got the play calling stripped out of his hands by Houston Nutt, and so he left and went to Tulsa the very next year to kind of restart his career. And here he is yet at Auburn doing the same exact damn thing to Rhett Lashley and Chip Lindsey, and it is absolutely baffling to me.
Not only that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to repeat what I said.
Yeah. Not only that, Brandon, he has, in 2011, when they started off, scored a lot of points, and they couldn't stop anybody, and Chizik wanted him to slow down. Yeah. To help the defense. And next thing you know, he's taking a $500,000 pay cut to go to Arkansas State. But now, like you said, now he's done the same thing, and that he hated. And it's baffling. And it's particularly baffling because at the times he hasn't done it since 2013, after 2013, the times he hasn't done it are the times it's worked the best.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's hard to understand.
Brandon, I want to one thing that I forgot earlier is regarding Hugh Freeze, and I know Ronnie might have some more info here. But if that's the direction Auburn wants to go, with Mike Locksley, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, being under consideration for this Maryland job, could Auburn potentially have to battle Alabama to land Hugh Freeze? Ronnie, are you hearing anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I would think it'd be a strong possibility, but but the other part of that is that the Freeze has a prior strong relationship with Gus Malzahn, so it'd be interesting to watch. Nick might just give it to Dan Enos and let him go with it, but it'd be interesting to watch.
I like Dan Enos. I might be the only one who does. I like him.
He's a really, really good football coach. I don't know anything about him as a person, but he didn't do a great job as a head coach. But as far as coaching quarterbacks and running an offense, he's done a really, really good job.
He's really fantastic, and he was a name I briefly heard at Auburn before Chip Lindsey came on board, very briefly. But obviously, he wasn't very much on the radar. So anyway. Going to be interesting, guys. So how many touchdowns does Auburn beat Alabama by here in a couple of weeks? Like 3?
Like I said, nobody should listen to me for strategy. But if it was me, if I was Gus, I would do the same thing he did in 2014. I'd just go over there and sling it deep every play.
Yeah. That was a hell of a game to watch until the last quarter and a half.
Until they quit covering Amari Cooper.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think the thing that's frustrating fans the most here is that they just know how the season's going to play out from here. And the only thing to really look forward to for them is maybe the bowl game, just to see who they play. And then if there are any changes and Gus Malzahn comes out and says, hey, we're going to do things differently here or there. But certainly looks like Gus Malzahn is going to be the head coach in 2019, maybe even further. And we're going to see if he's learned from any of his mistakes. And we didn't even talk about Auburn just came off a loss to Georgia where they still can't score against Georgia in Athens or in the Peach State for that matter for whatever reason. I mean, Georgia's not on Gus Malzahn's mind, but Georgia is in his head. I'll tell you that.
They can score in the first quarter.
That's the other thing. I know I can't.
That's remarkable. It's amazing.
Isn't that crazy? Their opening drives or in the first quarter, they look perfect offensively.
I know.
What happens? It's scripted, of course, those first drives, first 7 to 11 plays. But after that, it's like they're just bumbling across the sideline trying to figure out what to call.
It's really weird.
But I guess that's what happens when Gus Malzahn's in your head while you're trying to call plays every down.
Yeah.
Oh, well. We'll see if the communication lines clear up for Auburn. But I think we've said our piece, and it's going to be an interesting next few weeks. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here on the Auburn Undercover Roundtable. Make sure to go to auburnundercover.com for full coverage on everything football. Basketball season is underway, and boy, do they look really good. Maui Invitational's coming up next Monday. And recruiting, of course, is going to be heating up with the early signing period. And Kelly Bryant visiting Auburn soon. And you can make sure and check out Keith's interview with Kelly Bryant here coming soon at auburnundercover.com as well. We'll see you guys down the road.